All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code PODCAST5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends. Dr. Asia Muhammad is a naturopathic doctor with a degree in chemistry, biology, and naturopathic medicine. She completed a 3-year postgraduate residency under 2 MD gastroenterologists and specializes in gut and liver health. This combination of training has given her a profound understanding of the necessary balance between conventional and non-conventional medicine. Building on her educational background, Dr. Asia brings an empowering, highly researched, and no-nonsense approach to wellness that has helped her heal thousands of clients throughout her practice. Dr. Muhammad values the power of lifestyle modifications to achieve optimal health. She uses evidence-based and science-based medicine to provide individualized attention to those in her practice. As a naturopathic doctor, she utilizes nutrition, exercise, supplementation through nutraceuticals, botanical medicines, and mind-body therapies such as hypnosis. She has a special interest in gastroenterology, mind-body medicine, and stress management, as increasing research demonstrates the role of stress in disease. This was such a fun conversation. I have loved following along with Dr. Asia's work online, and it was even more of a pleasure to interview her today. Let's welcome her to the show. Dr. Asia, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to kind of shoot the breeze with you today.
I know. I was telling you before the show started that it was one of those things where all of a sudden Instagram was serving up your content to me, and I was down the Dr. Asia rabbit hole. I was like, yes, girlfriend. I love what you're saying about liver health. I love what you're saying about clean water. And you're making everything so accessible and science-backed and giving people real tools. So thank you for, I know it's a full-time job, but thank you for really conceptualizing the concepts or breaking them down and making them accessible to people. It's really
totally
awesome.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I'm curious because I didn't see this when I went down the Dr. Asia rabbit hole, but how did you get excited about becoming a naturopathic doctor, and what's your story?
So there's 5 of us in terms of siblings, and my mom has always been kind of a granola mom. Like, I didn't know the terminology back then, but she's very granola. Mine is the Birkenstocks. Yeah. So we kind of grew up in this house where, her thought was, if something was wrong, your body's trying to send you a message. So figure it out. Like, that's exactly what she would say to us. And so, like, we never kept any medicine in the house. I didn't have my first ibuprofen until I was 22. And when we had menstrual cramps or headaches or constipation, she had this book by this woman. and it had like ND on it. I'd never seen that before. I think the book was by, I think it was like Linda Page or something. She writes a ton of these like natural health books. I went to undergrad and kind of same mentality, root cause, figure out what your body's telling you through all your kind of sickness, upper respiratory infections, the whole nine. I was always trying to figure out what tea I could take. She had a medicine cabinet stocked full of tea she would find. And granted, she didn't have any science background. Like she just grew up in the inner city St. Louis, kind of went to like a small business college, and then she was just a stay-at-home mom. And so she just kind of like would find things at the store and we just kind of stocked the house with them. And so whenever we had like health related issues as kids, we'd go to this cabinet and pull out green tea or whatever tea she had. And when I went to school and, undergrad, you're not taught about integrative or holistic medicine. It's not offered as an option. Usually the routes to medicine essentially is like the MD or DO or nurse practitioner. And so when I was in school, the only route I knew that existed was that route. So I was in all these medical clubs and I thought I'd go and be like some type of heart surgeon. And I went and shadowed all these like heart surgeons and vascular surgeons. And I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, this cannot be what I'm about to do. Like, this is not what I want to do. And they would just roll a patient in, do a procedure, roll them out. And I just thought I want to be more involved and nosy, in my patients' lives.
I love it. We need nosy. People are not curious and nosy anymore unless they're going down your path.
Exactly. And so yeah, I got really sick one semester in school. And I think it had to do with just me being in too many clubs, doing too many things. And my system was just overwhelmed. And I had this really bad upper respiratory infection. And I went through this book and just kind of flipped through the pages to see what I could do for my lungs. And it was like in this moment, because I was applying to like a conventional medical program. And I saw ND, and I think it was God, universe, whatever. It just clicked. And I was like, let me just see what ND means. And I got on Google. And I Googled it and I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing. I don't care what they require. I don't care where the school was at. I'm going to Japan. It's like, this is where it's at. That's where I'm going. And so I applied and toured and went and visited the school in Arizona, and I got in and just kind of been rocking and rolling ever since.
Wow. Congratulations. Yeah. And I'm so glad you had that book. I'm sorry you had an upper respiratory infection, but listen, I
know.
Just think about that. Like you were going down this path, ready to do vascular surgery. And then you're like, this doesn't feel right. It's not in alignment with what I need to do. So can we talk about your everyday life now as a naturopathic doctor and how you see and treat patients?
Totally. So when I got out of school, which we do a 4-year program after undergrad, I did another 3 years of training under just MD. So it was gastroenterologists, they were hepatologists. And so my practice now is primarily focused in gut and liver because I just what I'm familiar from seeing thousands and thousands of these cases. And so I see a lot of like chronic GI issues, functional GI issues, fatty liver related issues. I also see a ton of metabolic disease because one of the bigger reasons why I wanted to join the profession or become a naturopathic doctor was because I was just tired of seeing the folks in my family on all these medications and they were still dying of heart disease. Like my aunt died at like 47 of a stroke, and she worked at a fast food restaurant as like a manager, and she ate the food there, right? But her doctors kept telling her, oh, it's your high blood pressure, it's this, it's that. But nobody ever discussed her diet with her. And I just remember being traumatized as a little girl, like going to her funeral. She was here one day and gone the next. And she was doing what the doctors told her to do, and she still passed. And she was really young, and she had 3 young daughters. So I think about her. I think about my aunt. I think about my grandmother, my great grandmother. So it just frustrates me, to be honest. Like it's really angering and frustrating when I think about them trusting the medical system and thinking that, oh, these doctors have our best interests at heart, but they really are essentially pawns for the pharmaceutical industry. And they just kind of follow an algorithm. And it's not their fault, essentially, because it's kind of an indoctrination, right? Going through schooling that way, but it's essentially like an algorithm. Patient comes in with this, do that. And there's no room for kind of adding other tools. So that's why I got into the profession also. So I see a lot of metabolic cases. So I see weight related issues. I see blood sugar, diabetes. I see hypertension, cholesterol related issues as well. So yeah, those are my focus areas.
And they're such important areas because now that we know what's coming out about the microbiome and its impact on health and seeing just the major increase in uptick in COVID of metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, PCOS, infertility, like layer and layer and layer on top of all of these blood sugar related issues. So can we break down each one of these buckets? Let's talk about gut health, then we'll get into liver health and then metabolic health. I know that as a naturopathic doctor, you don't treat a person it's not in silos like that.
Exactly.
And we can talk about how they're interconnected. But when you're starting to see a patient at first, how do you look at them and diagnose or assess if they have an issue in any of these areas?
Okay. So whenever I see a patient, like I have a questionnaire that's like 1,000,000 pages long, and I know they hate it, but it's just like, I love being nosy. So I want to know everything. And so I give them this long questionnaire and it's like, okay, where did you grow up? Did you live near a factory? Oh, what kind of water did you drink? It's like all these little things, like from baby, were you breastfed? Were you C-section? Where were you born? So I love to know like all the nitty gritty and just kind of see what a person's baseline is. And when I see patients, like I had this teacher in school who's like, yeah, but patient needs 20 supplements. Just give them 20 supplements. If they're feeling great, keep them on it. And it's like, I guess that's one way to think. And I do believe that green allopathy is better than traditional allopathy. And that's like a big argument right now. It's like, oh, just giving supplements is the same as giving pills. But it's like, it's kind of the same, but it's not really the same when you think about side effect profile and adverse effects. I'm, however, not like a pill mill kind of gal. So I don't really throw the kitchen sink at folks. But my thought is more so removing the barriers to heal. And so for some people, that looks so different. And for some folks, it's essentially getting clean air every day. I may say, you need to buy an air doctor. You need to get something to clean the air at home. You may need to just, change your water source. Let's see what that feels like for 4 weeks. Let's see what it feels like to go to the bathroom every day. Like, let's eliminate all the other issues and all the diagnoses and the labels you have. And let's just kind of see like if we can bring your body back into homeostasis and see what the system does on its own. I think our bodies are so freaking intelligent. I think of them as like plants. Like I'm an avid gardener and I love collecting all things green. And so when you think about plants, like they literally do their own job. You really have to just give them a little bit of attention. They need some sunlight. They need some water, keep them away from certain bacteria, and they literally will just thrive. Like they don't need much. I think the human body is like that or even more intelligent than that. So yeah, I mean, I will throw the kitchen sink at people. I really do love experimenting with different protocols, but it's not necessary, I don't feel.
Well, first of all, I have to say that's so refreshing. You're firing me up and making me motivated because it is like, I think we've lost the belief, especially when you jump on the internet, of thinking that we are just magical and able to heal. And that is so sad for me because it's like, I think it's important to unearth these issues that people are dealing with. Leaky gut permeability, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Like I address these things, but it feels like those old depression commercials where it's like, are you sad? Are you lonely?
Exactly.
And you're like, well, if we're talking about 2019, 2020, maybe like, it's kind of like putting it in front of us to make us feel like, oh, should we be feeling upset or
right.
And it's good to address like, okay, I do have issues, but what you just said, like we are like plants. And I love that you're a gardener and collect all things green, but that you can heal without a lot and that you're just removing the barriers. Exactly. So let's talk about some of the barriers that you see with clients and things that people can do without needing someone to prescribe them or give them what you call it, a pill mill.
Yeah. So when I think about the barriers, I think the first barrier is like our mindset, right? I think that's like where you start. It's like a decision that you make if you want to traverse this path, if you want to continue living the way you're living or feeling the way you're feeling, or if you actually want to change. Like you have to start with the mind and everything else is just kind of moving the pieces around from there. And so you think about what we need to exist or to exist in a healthy manner, I guess. And that's, good, water, you need air, you got to breathe, you got to drink fluids, you have to eat food. And then I think on top of that movement, you think about stress, emotional health. So I really start with those basic levels. So I say, okay, what kind of water do you drink? Are you drinking tap water? Here's something simple you can do. And not everybody can afford like an air doctor or air purifier. So I'm like, listen, you can get some really cheap filters at local stores, right? You just start there. So I'll start with avoiding tap water, avoiding certain contaminated water sources. I will start with like clean air. Like what is the air in your area? I mean, I'm not sure if there's actually a website, if the EPA or the EWG is able to detect like kind of the contaminants in the air, pollutants in the air where local spaces are, or if it's just like water. They have the resource for tap water. You can put your zip code in. I'm not sure if they do the same for air quality, But I do know that pollution is everywhere, right? We have literature on pollutants in the environment and how they destruct our respiratory tree and then our system at whole. So if I know somebody lives near a freeway, even in my questionnaire, it's like, where do you live? Do you live near a freeway? It's like, okay, how close do you live to the freeway? Because we know people who live near the freeway have higher rates of certain respiratory issues or chronic inflammatory markers, right? So then I'm like, okay, well, you may not actually have any lung issues or systemic issues related to like frank inflammation, but you need to be on something to prevent an outcome based on kind of the environment you live in. So I'll do things like that. I don't really do like frank respiratory protocols in these cases, but I'll add in antioxidants that have been studied to assist with kind of reducing the damage from pollutants. And one of those things is like turmeric or curcumin. So I may add like a cheap thing like that. I may add like curcumin gummies in that are really simple for kids to eat, right? So the whole family can get in on it. And so then what else? Like food, I go over nutrition and kind of like what their diet is. I'm like, oh, what'd you have for, like, what do you eat? And everybody's like, oh, I eat really good. I have like eggs for breakfast. I have like a salad for lunch and I have like, chicken and vegetables for dinner. I'm like, okay, what did you have today for breakfast? Well, today was different. Like everybody says this, like, oh, today was different. I was in a rush. I had to get like some Starbucks. Like lunch, I had a burger, but I never eat burgers. I'm like, okay, yeah, burgers for lunch is what they eat. So yeah. I love asking those questions and trying to figure out like if this is like their normal diet or if they're just kind of like had a one day thing. But I typically go with the crappiest foods and like this is a diet and let's kind of start with that as a baseline. So I'll do dietary protocols and it can just be as simple as avoiding high carbs in the morning, right? And make sure you're getting your proteins and good fats. It may be something as simple as let's take out gluten for a few weeks and see how your system responds to that. Let's take out dairy. Let's add in dairy. It depends on the patient, right? So yeah.
Well, now I have to ask a follow-up. Mm-hmm. When are you adding in dairy for clients?
Mm-hmm. So when I see patients, so if somebody is lactose intolerant, then I typically will keep it out for them. They just don't have enough lactase to digest it, or I may add something else in for them. Like if I want them to get some like bovine colostrum, I may add in, that's a different form of, I guess it's not dairy, but it's from a cow. But for patients that don't have an issue with dairy products, if they're really like depleted or they're nutrient depleted, I may add in like a good quality, like yogurt, or even like, I'm a fan of raw milk, to be honest with you. So I may add in like, or recommend like some raw milk. I may add in, I don't know, what else would I add in for these folks? Typically I stick with like kind of a really good yogurt product, or like I may say, yeah, if you're okay with dairy, we can add in like a raw milk. And that's pretty much as far as I go with dairy products.
I love it. I grew up on a lot of dairy and then I had a lot of sinus infections. I ended up finding out I was celiac and dairy kind of was a issue for me as well. But during my pregnancies, when I'm nauseous in my first trimester, like cottage cheese or plain Greek yogurt first thing in the morning, it's bland, tastes like nothing. And I know about all that nutrition that I'm getting. It's like one of those ways, like I can sneak in the protein when I have, and if I have protein aversions, just so I'm not like riding that blood sugar roller coaster.
Exactly.
So I love that you mentioned that, just because I think, it depends on every person, right? And that's
I think dairy is criminalized too. I think that in the health and wellness space, it's like, oh my gosh, you got to avoid gluten and dairy and all these things. And I just think that for some folks, these can be really nutritious foods. And you think about populations around the world, that have consumed good quality dairy products. So I'm not averse to it, but a lot of people that I see eat really refined dairy products and crappy food. So I'm like, let's just take it out and see how your body performs. And if they're like, I really want to add back in dairy, I'm like, let's try this higher quality and see what your body does afterwards. And just kind of play it like that.
Definitely. Well, going down that rabbit hole, and kind of getting back to gut health. Can we talk a little bit about supporting gut health and how you look for and address food sensitivities with clients?
So when it comes to gut health, like I'll say this, I've not seen a patient yet that doesn't have gut issues. And that's because people coming to see me aren't just like super perfectly healthy. They obviously have some kind of health issue. Otherwise they wouldn't want to come see me. So most people do have gut issues. And when I say gut issues, I'm meaning subjective and objective. So subjectively, they're saying like, hey, I'm bloated, I'm gassy, I'm nauseous, have dyspepsia, I can't stop burping, I can't go to the bathroom. And then objectively, I'm like, okay, you have ulcerative colitis, or you have actually diagnosed Crohn's, or you may have leaky gut, you may have SIBO, things we can actually track and measure. So I see all sorts of things, even dysbiosis. I often see that one. I've not done a stool panel yet without seeing dysbiosis as a result. And I've seen so many of these panels. So I think we all have dysbiosis. It's the world we live in. There are studies detailing how pollution can create leaky gut, right? In animal models. So I'm not sure if it's been studied in humans, but a lot of times animal models do translate over to human models. And so, it's just, we all have gut issues. We're all toxic in the world we live in. It's just a relative scale of what that looks like, right? And if our body's able to mitigate the effects of that.
Right, definitely. So when you're diagnosing or looking at a client's gut health, what are some of your favorite panels for looking at, whether it's anti-inflammatory byproducts like butyrate or inflammatory byproducts like calprotectin? Is there a panel that you love the most? And
yeah, so I use currently Vibrant Wellness. I like their panel. I also use Microbiome Labs.
Okay.
They have a really nice stool profile as well. So those are the two companies I like. Now, when it comes to Vibrant has all those kind of inflammatory markers on there. The thing is they're very transient. So you can't really rely on them as diagnostic, and you can never diagnose somebody with inflammation of the gut based on elevated calprotectin. So I do use those though. And I do sometimes track them in patients to see kind of where their levels are over time. And I do see them fluctuate, go down, go up. I like to look at more so the bacteria profiles to kind of check and see kind of if they have elevated amounts of Enterobacteriaceae, which is kind of like a unofficial gold standard of dysbiosis in the gut. So if you see that one, you're like, yeah, your gut is jacked up. And then I'll say see if the Akkermansia is within level. If it's too high, that can be an issue. If it's too low, that can be an issue. All the bifido, the lacto, all of those you want to see in a good range. Most folks that I see on these panels don't take probiotics. And it's interesting to see that they do have sufficient amounts of the good bacteria, but I usually never see all of them within the healthy range. Usually there's something off. And then when they do take probiotics, sometimes you don't see them actually increasing the numbers at all, which makes me wonder about the probiotic and if it's actually reaching the colon or if there's something else happening in the gut. More than likely, it's the quality of the probiotic.
Definitely. So if the probiotics aren't making their way to the gut, they're not proliferating, they're not, causing those changes or increasing the quantity or variety of bacteria in the gut, what is the best way to do that? And how do you recommend your clients do that?
Yeah, I love talking about prebiotics, which I'm so happy there's so much information on now. And you can literally Google prebiotics and you have a list of foods you can eat. So I typically will recommend resistant starches that, essentially they resist digestion. So they move down to your colon and the bacteria there kind of eat them like dessert and they kind of grow and proliferate. And so I'll recommend things like lentils or beans. If somebody's interested in increasing their proteins, I'll have them do those foods. I may add in I love the onion, garlic, leek family. I just think it's so it's just like a factotum. There's so many different aspects of the body that these foods work on. So I'll increase those. I may add just certain powders, prebiotic powders. There's some formulations that have been scientifically studied and validated for increasing certain bacteria. So there are formulas I like. There's a company, it's Microbiome Labs. They make tons of great microbiome support. And so they have a prebiotic that I just love throwing in for people to increase bacteria. It's a really cool powder. It tastes really good. So I'll do that. I'll add in
Remember what
powder.
It's called?
It's called MegaPre. I'm pretty sure it's called Mega. It's their only prebiotic.
Okay, great.
They have.
We'll link it in the show notes for people.
Totally.
And can you, and I want to go back to the banana flour because I totally cut you off, but can you break down for people what is the difference between a probiotic and a prebiotic? And you mentioned lentils and beans, onion, garlic, and leek. Where is it in the plant itself? And you said resistant starch. Are there other forms of prebiotics? Yeah.
Totally. So when a prebiotic versus a probiotic, so I always explain this like a garden. So when you have a garden and you're ready to kind of start it up the next year, you can do a couple of things. You can add fresh new dirt, right? And that would be a probiotic. Or you can add fertilizer to the old dirt, which would be a prebiotic. So that's as simple as I can explain. Prebiotics grow the stuff you already have and help to nourish that. Probiotics is just new dirt that you're kind of putting in. Probiotics, we don't know if they actually fully colonize the gut or if they're just kind of washing through the gut. But either way, they exert tons of beneficial effects. And I found them to be remarkable tools for gut cases and non-gut cases.
So what are some of your favorite probiotics? I loved that example, by the way. I love an analogy. It was perfect.
Great. So my favorite probiotics, I'm obsessed with the spore-based probiotics. So they're different from like your lactobacillus or your bifido, which are not like spore-based. So spore-based probiotics, they resist digestion. So they last past your stomach. They actually get to the colon where you want them to behave. And they have just different literature behind them with regards to some of the effects, longevity effects. And so the one that I love is, it's called Megaspore.
Megaspore-biotic.
Yeah, Megaspore-biotic with Microbiome Labs. It's just a great formulation, and it's a combination of a couple different ones. But that's one that I always recommend. I take it myself every day. There's some really cool literature around it, upregulating certain processes associated with like longevity and lifespan. So I'm obsessed with that as well. So I take that. There's a company I like now called Prebiotic. It's a formulation, RES Biotic, but they formulated this probiotic with a couple of botanicals in it for lung function specifically. So it's a group out of Alabama, and it's a pulmonologist and his team, and they basically have formulated this really cool probiotic that you can take for lung health. So I think it's really great given our current circumstance in the pandemic. So that's one that I really love. Let's see. I used to be obsessed with the De Simone formula, who's like this French scientist. He created VSL, which is now like this biome, which you can still buy. But that's one that I like because you can reach really, really high concentrations, like 900 billion bacteria. And I use that one for patients with like Crohn's colitis, more colitis than anything. And I find it works really decent, really nice in those cases.
Definitely. I feel like a lot of the functional MDs used VSL3 for a while. And it was, and it is, it's like, now it's so funny that you mentioned both spore-based and VSL, because I feel like in your community, those were two that really, I think as physicians, you guys saw a real difference in your patients and they're science backed and literature backed. And you mentioned two very popular ones in the community that I work with. So it's awesome.
Yeah, I like them. There are tons of other ones as well, but those are the ones that I'm really familiar with.
I think it's also nice that spore-based probiotics can tend to be, adding supplements, like you said, being a pill mill, like it ends up being, it can be expensive for people, but I've been impressed with some of the spore-based probiotics and just knowing that you're feeling an effect on it. For me personally, like we started giving my son Sebastian spore-based probiotics after he was born. He was born, had a pretty traumatic birth. He went to the NICU. He was given antibiotics, it was like a whole thing, and had eczema, and the spore-based probiotics, we like dumped a half a cap in a pumped bottle for him. And we saw major changes in 6 weeks.
Wow.
It was like insane. It was so amazing.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm like so thankful to Megaspore-biotic for that, like, to be honest. Okay. So you have your clients leaning on fertilizing their soils with prebiotics. So we're talking about the allium family, onion, leek, garlic, beans, and those resistant starches and undigestible fibers in the foods that we eat. You have people focus on protein and healthy fats in the morning, looking at their air, looking at their water quality. Looking a little deeper into the body at organs like liver health, what are you seeing when it comes to clients dealing with either a sluggish liver, or how do you diagnose non-alcoholic fatty liver disease?
So, with regard to our current like world and state of affairs in our environment, our water, our air, I do think that we should all be focusing like special attention on organ systems like the liver, right? Which is like the huge filter of the body. The liver does so much more, right? It creates our proteins, carrier proteins for our blood. It helps with hormone synthesis and so many other processes. It's just not detoxification. And kind of when you think about the body, you think like the size denotes the importance and the functionality. And the liver is so huge in the body. And you think if it's that big, it has to have other functionality and it has to have a high level of importance. And so that's why I think that we should all be focusing in some regard attention on our liver. And that can be so simple as like castor oil packs. It can be so simple as just kind of a specific botanical tea we do every day to help with liver processes. But, when I see cases of liver related issues, you can have liver issues and have normal liver blood work. And I've seen patients with cirrhosis of the liver and their liver enzymes are in the normal range, right? So you can't rely on blood work for liver disease. You have to rely on symptom picture. You have to rely on their clinical picture. You have to rely on maybe imaging if they have it, ultrasound, jelly on the belly, blood work as well, because I've seen a 30-year-old person with cirrhosis of the liver. And once you have cirrhosis, it's like 10 years of life remaining because the liver is like a raisin. So you either get a transplant or you like pretty much die within 10 years. So,
wow, that's so scary to think about. And so can you talk to me about, I love that you're breaking down what the liver does. And and you have just like your analogies and explanations, like the liver is huge. Like we can look at even people who don't know, biology they can like picture the human body and be like, yeah, it's like a huge, like steak inside the body. Like, but like, what does it do? So you mentioned that it detoxes. Can we talk about what the liver detoxes? And I'd also like to go a little deeper into what are castor oil packs and what botanical teas do you love?
Yeah. So when it comes to the liver and detoxification, it pretty much detoxifies chemicals that we're inhaling, chemicals that we consume via foods, via liquids, anything we're putting on our body goes into our bloodstream. And so there's a possibility that these things are flowing as well from our skin to our liver, and our liver has to kind of break them down. So in terms of breakdown, we think about our cytochrome systems, which are these major detoxification basically warehouses, and they're not so big. They're just kind of intracellular processes, but you have cytochrome systems outside of your liver. You have them in your lungs. You have them in other organ tissues as well. So other organ tissues do detoxify things also, but the liver just has a larger capacity for that. The liver has the highest amount of glutathione, which is an antioxidant, and it's there because glutathione supports a lot of detoxification processes. So I think that also speaks to the liver's kind of capacity for regulation of toxins or chemicals in the body. So the liver will convert them via a few different processes, and the goal is to either pee them out or poop them out. So we'll conjugate them, add different molecules to make it more water soluble, or for the kidneys to recognize it and allow it to leave the body. And same thing with the bowels. And so when you think about what the liver detoxes, most of the blood going into the liver, it's like 70% of the blood that goes into the liver is coming from the gut. So a major thing that the liver detoxifies is like anything that we're eating, right? Anything we're taking. So that's supplements, that is medications as well, right? So those things go through the liver. And you call like this first pass metabolism, where if you're taking medication, after you orally take it, the liver's going to kind of get its first go at it and say, okay, like, what are we doing with this? And then it kind of gets out into the system. So it depends on kind of what we're eating, what supplements we're taking, what we're drinking, what we're exposed to as well. But the liver is always working.
Wow. So other than chemicals, I know it detoxifies hormones and gets rid of old cholesterol particles. So when you think about the liver, like I think about all the jobs it does, how can we make it the most efficient at doing those jobs and like free up space and time for it? Like what suggestions do you have? Because in the beginning of the podcast, when you mentioned removing barriers, like I think about like, it's like its own little machine and it's doing all these things. What barriers are we creating, and what barriers do we have when it comes to slowing down or creating, causing backup in the liver? What can we remove?
So when I think about barriers to remove for the liver, I first think about the gut, because most of that blood going into the liver is coming from the gut. So I think about everything that we're eating. So avoiding certain foods. I mean, the simplest way is just to avoid processed crap, right? And to try to cook as much as you can, or eat a whole clean food type of diet where you can control what's going in and you can control the variables. So that's the first place I would start. I mean, avoiding alcohol as much as possible. I mean, that's something really simple to avoid, but it's not simple for so many folks because it's such a social thing to do. So I think that's one thing to consider, or just reduce the amount of intake, because it's like one drink or alcohol, one serving of alcohol can disrupt the gut junctions and create this like leaky gut. And if you do that continuously, it's just kind of a continuous process. And the gut does repair itself. So it's not just like, oh my gosh, one drink and my gut is messed up forever. But I think that, in social settings, we have to be really mindful of kind of alcohol consumption for liver and gut. I think, like I said, processed foods. I think sodas are a huge one. For me, sodas are like so 1990s, especially diet sodas. And it's like, who drinks diet sodas anymore? It's like so 1990. But a lot of people drink these things, diet sodas and like non-diet sodas. So it's like the diet sodas have like their own artificial sugars that mess up the gut, which can also affect the liver. And then like the sugary sodas have like the high fructose corn syrup, which is like the devil. It's like the one ingredient that I'm always after. And so it's like, that's a big factor in liver disease because we have a ton of fructose receptors on the liver. So when you eat high fructose corn syrup, it's just naturally more of it's going to go to the liver just based on the uptake cellular process. And that's a huge issue in kids now because a lot of kids, not only sodas, but fruit juices, like they have high fructose corn syrup in them. And I don't think that a lot of parents are aware of how dangerous this ingredient is. And like pediatric doctors are seeing fatty liver in kids now.
I know it's heartbreaking, especially as a mom. Like my boys are 3 and 1 and they are carnivores. They are in search of the sugar, and I will say like on Sebastian's like school intake, they were like, does he have any allergies? Is there anything we should be aware of? And I just like wrote in his intake, like we don't do liquid sugar. That means no juice, no Gatorades, no sodas, no lemonades. Like at snack time, like I'm happy to provide him with like a flavored like lemon, or he can make spa water here. We have an electrolyte drink, but that is something that like scares me looking at the research, especially because we just, it's kind of everywhere and kids love sugar. Like all the research shows that they, as they get older into their teen years, they can find these drinks like actually not repulsive, but they aren't prone to grab for the sweetest drink. But when you have these kids, it makes sense. Like, sugar keeps us alive and grows these babies.
Exactly.
And of course, they're going to have these receptors that these highly palatable, high sugar drinks are just delicious to them. And so, that was kind of like one of the ways that, you can't control everything at school or at daycare. But one of the things where I was like, this will take care of like 90%, not 90%, but a large majority of maybe the issues of him being able to learn or focus or process or whatever. So thank you for bringing that up because it's totally, it's serious. So, okay. So back to castor oil packs. How do you use them? What are they? And what botanicals do you love for the liver?
Yeah. So castor oil packs, I learned about these packs in naturopathic school. And I guess they're just an old form of medicine where you apply castor oil to like a piece of flannel or a cloth. Typically, I was taught a piece of flannel and you put it over the liver area. So that's your right upper quadrant. So usually it's like right over the right rib cage, right? And what you do is put like a hot oil pack over it to essentially drive the castor oil kind of through that area, the skin of that area. You can put like a plastic wrap or saran wrap underneath the cloth so that the oil is not messy and going everywhere. And then you put like a hot compress or something on top of that. Now, I know castor oil packs work really well for constipation. I've seen that to where somebody does a castor oil pack and within the same day or the next day, they have a really nice full evacuation. So I don't really know what the mechanism is. There are like 2 studies out there with regard to castor oil packs and increasing bowel frequency. So we know that it's been validated in a clinical or a scientific setting, but I'm not sure what the mechanism is, to be honest with you. I'm not sure if it's like a liver related mechanism or like an abdominal related mechanism, just kind of the heat and the location. But I think it's something to be said for that. The pack being over the liver organ in and of itself, and that the liver is an organ of like elimination or detoxification. So I also use them for people who are doing detox protocols for whatever reason. Either they're doing like heavy metal or they're doing like just pollutant detox protocols, or they have like some kind of chronic autoimmune process. I mean, I've done them for so many folks. They're so simple. They're so easy and they have pretty much no side effects. There are people who don't want to do them in, people who have like cancers or certain related issues in those areas. You don't want to kind of put any more like stimulation over the tissue site. So there are like contraindications, like pregnancy. You don't want to do that. So I will do them in like people who are looking to detox further. And I find that it kind of just helps push them along if they're in like a static phase of detoxification and they feel more sluggish or they're starting to kind of regress. So I'll do those and just have them do them 3 times a week before bed. And I say before bed because your liver is more metabolically active during the nighttime, which is why in the morning we're supposed to have a normal, nice poop when we wake up because the body was just resting and digesting and you get up and you release. So I'll have them do them more in the evening so that their body can take advantage of the full process and then go to bed. And then in the morning, typically they go to the bathroom and get stuff out. So I love them. They're really simple. They're super cheap. You can make your own. You can build your own, the whole 9 yards.
I love this. And it is interesting and just something to note. I'm sure people listening there, the transdermal, you can have transdermal medications, you can have transdermal castor oil, just to like realize that there are active effects on organs and on your GI tract with simply adding castor oils. Like that gives me a visual of like, well, when you're slathering your body with with chemicals or like known problems in your beauty care, like what's actually happening there, and just more motivation for people to kind of clean out their medicine cabinet and their bathroom.
Yeah. I'll tell you this funny story when I realized that, how powerful our skin is with regards to absorption. I think I was like 18 or 19. And I wanted like to henna dye my hair because my mom was not going for any chemicals whatsoever when I was young. So
God, I love your mom.
I know everybody loves her. And I'm like, oh, you love her. But being raised by her, it's like, whew, we call her the prison warden because she did not play. But I wanted to dye my hair. And so she was like, yeah, try some henna. So I got this henna dye. And henna, you have like the regular dye and you have like an indigo you can use, like a more deeper bluish hue. And my hair is already black. So I just figured I would go for the more deepish, bluish, purplish hue. So I did the henna, but I left it on overnight thinking like, I'll just leave it on longer so that it can really soak in. I got up the next morning and my urine was green. I thought my kidneys were failing. I was so confused. But I realized that the henna had absorbed through my scalp.
Wow.
And it was filtered out through my kidneys. And I looked this up and it was like, don't worry. It's just that like the henna dye, but there's some components that my body was like, yeah, this is not available to the system. Let's go ahead and eliminate it. And I was so shocked that overnight, something that I put on my scalp wasn't all on just on my scalp, was able to go through my body. And my body was like, no, we got to filter this out. And it was literally green urine.
Motivation, friends, to change your shampoo and conditioner, change your lotion.
Yes.
Get rid of all of that. Yeah. Oh, it's tough. And I know people feel like overwhelmed by it, especially if they're used to like Maybelline mascara, CVS brands and all that stuff. Like, but today, now more than ever, like when I think back to when Tom's was like one of the first natural toothpastes on the market, and now comparing Tom's to like some of the hydroxyapatite toothpastes, you're like, Tom's can do so much better.
So much better, right? My mom was like Tom's girl through and through. And so now I'm like, no, mom, you have to like move. This is so 1990s. We need you to elevate. I like Tom's. It's, it's cool. But, there's so many other cool products to try.
Yeah, totally. Chris brought some home the other day and I just know that my husband, because like he just was like, I'm trying to pick a toothpaste at Whole Foods. And I'm like, there's SLS in this and carrageenan. Like,
I know.
What the heck, Tom's? Like,
I know.
Get on board.
I know.
I was like, I'm sorry, babe, this one's not going to work, but I'll get us some. Don't worry. You just like, if it's
love it.
If it's going through your skin or if it's like getting into your gums, like let's kick it. So you mentioned castor. I want to go back because you're just a wealth of knowledge, but you mentioned castor oil packs as a way to increase bowel movements and to optimize digestion. And you talked about how the liver is performing more functions and is more efficient in the evening. It makes perfect sense to me because I think about, as a sleep deprived mama, sometimes how when I get in bed earlier than I normally do, and even if my kids wake up at 5, I'm like, woo, good bowel movement. Like everyone likes that feeling. Everyone wants that feeling. So what are your tips for optimizing digestion for people who may not have a bowel movement every morning? And what are some barriers to that process?
Totally. So I think the barriers and optimization kind of go hand in hand, right? Because if you're able to remove the barriers, you're essentially optimizing functionality. And so when I think about barriers, like I just posted something on IG the other day about bowels, and I see the same thing in all constipated cases. It's either a few things, poor hydration, right? So the colon is like a huge water transit, right? A huge water. I know. And I just had coffee this morning, so I'm probably dehydrated, but
I'm like literally pounding water on the other side of this video.
I love it. So the colon is essentially like a water station in the body, right? And where the body's like, listen, the skin's dehydrated, or the kidneys are dehydrated, or we need some water in the lungs today, or what the cells here need hydration. We're going to say, let's go and see what the colon has. Like, we don't have any like water bags hanging out in the body with like water reserves. I mean, we have our bladder, I guess, but it's not really where you're going to pull water from, but you can. But the colon is like actually a water, like kind of transport station in the system. So if your body is dehydrated, it's going to pull it from the gut. It's going to pull it from the stools, which means that your stools are going to be more dry or hard or kind of just harder to pass. So you're constipated. So the biggest thing, I'm like, hydrate. And most folks don't actually drink enough water or the right types of water. I love like mineral or spring water just because I find that distilled water can just be, I find different effects when people drink spring mineral water versus like distilled waters or like boiled waters. So I'm always advocating like certain types of water, certain types of hydration. And then I always find like poor fiber intake, like nobody eats enough fiber. And the easiest way to throw that in is like a smoothie, especially in the spring, summer when it's like hot out and you want something cool. Outside of that, I'm like, add more veggies to your plate or add, more fibrous products or take a fiber powder. I mean, I'd rather you get the poop out than keep it in. And so I'll do that. And I also see dysbiosis, so terrible bacteria imbalance in the gut, and bacteria produce their own chemicals and metabolites that can actually slow down the motility of the gut, which means your bowels aren't moving. And then I also see like just issues with like anatomical like colon distortion. So you have people who have like a loopy colon, or their colon that's a little bit more twisty than others. So it's just physically harder to get the stools out. And so that's more of a anatomical kind of workaround. It's not fiber, it's not water, it's like dysbiosis. There's something else you have to kind of work with. And then I also see people who have histories of eating disorders. They're the hardest like constipation patient population for me, because essentially the nerves are just kind of like not functioning, because for so many years they've not pooped, right? If you have these eating disorders, or you've taken tons of laxatives, so your body doesn't know how to do it on its own. So I find that these patients will go like weeks without a bowel movement, and they have to literally take something, which is an issue, because then they kind of get back into the swing of the eating disorder pattern. So those are the most challenging for me. I've been successful with some, but not all. So yeah, those are the common reasons I find for like kind of slower bowels. And like, just with that being said, you doing those things can optimize your bowel functioning.
Definitely. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the bacteria that can slow motility. And do you know what specific strains you're looking for? If someone has like either a Genova GIFX or one of the tests that you mentioned, what can they be looking for? And are there specific prebiotics that feed other bacteria that will keep things moving, or find a way to like decrease that population of bacteria?
Yeah. So when I see people with constipation and they're doing stool tests, and I used to use Genova, I'm really familiar with their tests as well. So I typically will have them look for like the methane family of bacteria, right? Typically you see that with SIBO, but stool tests are not diagnostic for SIBO. So you can't tell somebody they have SIBO based on a GI map or Vibrant Wellness, any other test, because that's looking at colon bacteria. So if I see that in their stool panel, I will say, okay, yeah, you may have, this may be why you have some constipation, and we'll work on that bacteria family and either outcrowding it with good stuff, or, using things to kind of bring it down. There are certain botanicals you can use that are antibacterial in the gut. Like I love berberine. It's just a really amazing, beautiful constituent from not just one plant, a couple different plants, but that's one that I'll use. I'll put together other like gut herbal antibiotic protocols to kind of just nuke some stuff out the gut, and then add in some good stuff like probiotics, prebiotics, and then just kind of say, okay, how's the belly doing now?
I'm sure so much better with your help, Dr. Asia.
I hope so.
I mean, there's so much to learn from you, and I just love how you look at the body in a holistic way and can kind of attack things in a different way. And you bring up points like if someone had a history of an eating disorder and what that might look like. Like there's people that are banging their head against a wall because they're constipated, and what a frustrating to feel like you're like reuptaking potential toxins from your gut, or that you just feel like sluggish and sick. And like it's just such a sign of good health. And that's, I think, why humans feel so excited when they have like an awesome bowel movement in the morning.
It's so wonderful. I was dating this guy once when I was in residency, and I was just only talking about poop. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had the best bowel movement this morning. And we didn't have a second day. I think he was just like, ew, what is this? But I'm like, what do you mean? You don't look at your stools? You don't talk about these things? I think we should all be talking about our bowels and how they look. I had a patient I just saw yesterday. It was a follow-up. And when I initially saw her, she had just terrible, terrible bloating. She looks pregnant when she's bloated. Now, typically when I see this, I think about SIBO, bacterial overgrowth, but this wasn't the case for her. She had like some skin issues. It wasn't like acne. It was something else going on. And then she had poor energy. I literally said, let's just optimize your bowel function. And she was going once a day, but I don't feel like they were full evacuations, how she described them. I mean, she got a good amount out, but it wasn't like a full poo. And people will say, I went to the bathroom, but I don't feel like I'm fully evacuated. And I'm like, yeah, well, you're probably not if you feel that. And you know, when you're fully evacuated. So I just optimized her bowel function. I added one supplement to help her go to the bathroom. And literally she's like, yeah, my skin issue is gone. My energy is improved and I'm not bloated anymore. So you can go to the bathroom every day, but still be, underutilizing or, not fully evacuating the bowel. So just focusing on pooping.
Okay. So now I have to ask you, because everyone's going to want to know, what was that one supplement?
Oh, it's a product it's a Cellcore product, and it's called Bowel Mover.
Okay.
So this is one that I'll use just to kind of like a short-term experiment. Because I hate those like long protocols. They're like, oh, this will work in 6 months or in 3 months. Like, let's speed it up. And so sometimes I'll say, let's experiment and see if we can get it out quicker and see how your body responds. And that will give us insight to say, yes, it probably is a gut issue. Now let's work around that and do other kind of slower processes. But Bowel Mover is one that I'll use. Sometimes I'll even recommend over-the-counter meds. And like, let's just test the theory. I think this is a histamine-related issue. So go get some antihistamines. Let's dose it like this. If your symptoms go away, then we're on the histamine path. And then we'll just kind of take those off and add the natural antihistamines. Because natural antihistamines can take a while to work, but you can just kind of quickly get up to the curve, get to the point with some over-the-counters.
So when you're talking about, I love this because now you're speaking my language. My genetics show that I have a problem detoxifying histamines. And it's interesting because when I look back on being diagnosed with celiac disease and having some issues with dairy, I'm part of me and now it's like a Kelly consultation, but I'm also allergic to every single antibiotic on the market, from like penicillins to sulfa-based products to C-chlor and that is like, looking back, I had an overproduction of mucus, I think, as a kid, and I constantly was getting sinus infections, and my parents were constantly getting me antibiotics. And that's a bummer, right? You're like, what is the culprit of this? And it's interesting because having the celiac diagnosis and taking out the gluten and taking out the dairy, and then all of a sudden not having this overproduction of mucus, but then coming full circle and being like, it's really interesting that I'm also allergic to all these antibiotics. And then in looking at my genetics, I have a problem with histamines. Like, I don't know. It makes me curious because everyone, like you said, it's like, can you get nosy and look at like all the health history?
I know.
Like could it be histamine? So it's interesting because like an antihistamine, like a Zyrtec, may make me feel amazing. And that also makes me curious. So I do take a few things from Seeking Health.
I love their products.
Yeah. I think it's called like Probiotic
block or something. The probiotic one.
And then their probiotic one, just like trying them out. But I'd love to go further into this just because I know people do have, and I have a podcast that was histamine based, but for that antihistamine, like a Zyrtec or over the counter thing, like what symptoms might someone be having and what might they experience?
So typically when I see patients and they tell me like, yeah, I was able to eat these foods just fine. And now, I got sick or I had some episode of, I don't know, food poisoning or I got COVID or whatever. And now when I eat these foods, I just have the worst reaction. And they'll describe all these like respiratory type reactions, like skin reactions, GI reactions, bloating. And that will clue me in. And I see mast cell cases. So I have a local doctor here who's like, I don't know what's going on. Go see Dr. Muhammad. And so he'll send me all of his like, mast cell cases, and they're all like moldy, like they live in moldy places and there's a ton of mold exposure. And their system is just kind of like, if you're in your car, like, how your speedometer is like 0 to like 140, like you're never going to be at 140 unless you're like racing, but you need those varying levels so that you're not burning out all the time at 75. But these are folks who are like at 140 all the time. So their system is literally like burnt out. And so for me, when I think about these mast cell cases, like they're just reactive to everything. And so when I hear people saying like multiple systems they have reactions with, not just like their gut, they have like fatigue, the brain fog, they have skin, they have kind of upper respiratory tree symptoms, they have gut symptoms, I think there may be some histamine situation going on. there are some ways to, check for histamines. It's not, nothing's like super validated, but what I'll do is just a little experiment with like over-the-counter antihistamines. And I'm like, let's see, not necessarily the respiratory symptoms, how your gut symptoms feel, how your brain, does your brain fog go away, X, Y, and Z. And then I'll add maybe like even some famotidine, a different type of like acid histamine receptor medication. And we'll just do that for 1 week. And I'm like, okay, let's call me back in a week and let me know how you feel. And they're like, yeah, everything's gone away. It's like, well, you probably have excessive histamine. Then I'll just kind of titrate them off of those and then branch them onto more natural things like seeking help or like spirulina, which is like a really great mast cell stabilizer, or things like quercetin and just kind of like mast cell smoothies. And just, I love smoothies. So yeah.
Preach into the choir. I love it. So, and I saw one with beets the other day and I was like, oh yeah, I love that. We have to, I like literally could talk to you for hours.
I know. I could blab for hours.
I love it. So real quick, if someone were to take an antihistamine just to like do a personal test on themselves, over the counter antihistamine, not the normal histamine related things like, sinus congestion or like respiratory stuff. But when you talk about bowels or you talk about brain fog, like what should someone experience if they took an antihistamine, and what are they looking for? Like what beneficial reactions are they looking for?
Yeah. So I would say if you are somebody that you have like chronic unexplained like symptoms related to mental fatigue, brain fog, you notice worsening of your symptoms after eating certain foods that are not like gluten or dairy, because those tend to bother a lot of folks anyway. So after you remove gluten and dairy and you react to fruits and vegetables and other little things, if you have beyond just the upper respiratory issues, a ton of bloating or abdominal discomfort, then you would want to see like improvement in those areas, less brain fog, less bloating, less like skin related symptoms after eating food. So you want to track it like without foods and then post foods, right? So are your symptoms present as a reaction to something you're eating? Are they present as soon as you wake up in the morning without eating anything? And kind of go from there. So you want to get as much detail as possible. And then you want to dose the antihistamines like either around meal times if your issues mealtime related, or without meals. And you can get information either way, but antihistamine they work as antihistamine. So if you have improvement, then there probably is some theorized like histamine related issue, either mast cell or actually too much histamine being released from them. So,
wow, love it. So good. I have a couple of follow-up questions just on your smoothies. What are some of the favorite, because we're a smoothie community here.
I love it.
I can't tell you how many drinks I have in front of me. It's made me, I've like taken a sip of my coffee, my water, my green smoothie. It's an early morning podcast, so it's like all my things are here. But what are some of your favorite things to put in smoothies, and why?
Totally. So I make really good or really disgusting smoothies. So I will say my mom is a smoothie person, and she will put like a whole onion in her smoothie. I don't think she has taste buds at this point, but she literally will put anything in her smoothie that's like before it goes rotten. She's like, oh, this has to go somewhere. Let's blend it up. And then she serves us these like brown smoothies when we were about to go to school. Like, oh, so terrible. Yeah. So anyways, I like to put in my smoothies all types of like dehydrated berry powders. I love like the maqui berry, MAQUI, not maca. I love acai berry. I love the lingon berry, LINGON berry. I love aronia berries. I love elder. I just love all the dark purple berries. And the darker the color, the more antioxidants you find in them. So I will put like usually like a half a teaspoon in the smoothie of my berry powders. I will always add some type of like clean matcha. I love the L-theanine and matcha. I usually will add some type of like IgG, like bovine colostrum in my smoothies, just to help with like gut function and like gut immunity. Let's see, I always have probiotic powders. Now I do try tons of different probiotic brands, so I couldn't tell you which brand I like have now, but I'm probably going to put some Microbiome labs in there today when I make one. I usually always put some kind of protein, so I kind of alternate between like plant-based proteins and then like kind of grass-fed whey proteins, depending on what I'm going for. And let's see, I always use water because you can never have enough water. You can also do teas as well. But yeah, I usually do that. I sometimes will use bananas, but I usually use dark berries, and then I'll throw apples in with the skin on. I try to get 1 apple a day. So yeah,
keep the doctor away.
why apples are so amazing. I had a whole apple post on my page somewhere. Maybe I'll share it, but there's like so many cool studies around apples and lung function, gut function, what else? Like liver function, cancer risk, and so forth. But the skin of the apple is where you find a lot of the kind of antioxidant molecules. So you want to keep that on. Apples are also a really good source of pectin, which is a particular type of fiber that's been studied outside of the gut, but just in cancer models as like a modified pectin actually. So those are things that I like in my smoothies. I also will put like greens in there. I just put, honestly, it's really crazy at this point, but it's just like whatever I see, I'm like, oh, this needs to go in the smoothie today. So
I think it's such an efficient and amazing way to get that stuff into the gut, and it's pre-digested. And if you're putting protein in, then you're satisfying those hunger hormones and feeling great.
Exactly.
Apple pectin, note on that. I love apple pectin. Now Foods has an apple pectin fiber that I add to my
really?
that I love. Yeah, they're like one of the only brands that is, has organic apple pectin. So yeah, check that out.
Good to know. I will.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, Dr. Asia, time is up. And like I said, I could literally talk to you forever, but I want to thank you for your time. And I want you to tell our community where they can follow along with all the amazing information you put out into the world.
Totally. So I have pretty much two spaces. I occupy websites, www.asiamuhammad.com. And then I have just my IG page, which is just at dr.asiamuhammad. So I try to stay consistent on IG and post a few times a week, just like really good educational content. And then my website is just kind of like just who I am and what I do. So yeah.
I love it. Well, are you accepting new patients right now? And where can people get more information about that?
Yeah, so I pretty much open my schedule up like 2 times a month for just like new cases. And so if you reach out to me on my website, I can probably get you in if I have spots available, or I can just send you like links for the next available spots. But I see pretty much like gut, liver, and then metabolic issues. But if you're curious about something outside of that, just reach out and I'll tell you if it's in my wheelhouse or not.
Okay, great. And we'll definitely have you back. We got into the gut and the liver, but we need to dive into metabolic health too. And we need to go into everything that you're doing to share about like environmental justice and all that parts of that movement. I'd love to hear more about that too. Totally. So we're going to have to do a part 2.
Let's do it.
Okay, cool.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at bewellbykelly.com and follow me on Instagram at bewellbykelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.